This weekend marks exactly 13 years since the U.S. invaded Iraq. Now, more than a decade later, many argue the country has gone from bad to worse. The occupation was followed by a sectarian war, and now ISIS is on a bloody rampage across the region. All this created one of the worst refugee crises in history, with millions of Iraqis displaced, and those numbers only continue to grow. RT's Alexey Yaroshevsky looks at the timeline of Iraqis' mass exodus.
It's widely believed that the 2003 invasion of Iraq aggravated the country's refugee situation. Let's look at the timeline of Iraq's refugee crisis to find out whether that's so. The exodus within Iraq and from Iraq dates back to the 1980s, when the Iraq-Iran war began, followed by war with Kuwait and the subsequent Gulf War in 1991. Those three combined produced nearly 3 million refugees, 1.8 million of them being Iraqi Kurds who fled to Turkey and Syria, and the second largest group at 300,000 were Palestinians who resettled in Jordan. In 2003, when the U.S. invaded and occupied Iraq, effectively leading to Saddam Hussein's downfall, many of those who had left actually returned, thinking the country was on the path to a brighter future. How wrong they were. Sectarian war, which followed, made them leave again, with 2006 bombing of Al-Askari Mosque being one of the catalysts. In February 2007, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees said that the external refugee number fleeing the civil war amounted to 2 million people, and while the number of internally displaced people reached 1.7 million. That's approximately 1 in 25 Iraqis leaving their homes. That became the biggest refugee crisis in the entire history of the Middle East. And those were not just ordinary folks. Engineers, artists, lawyers, academics, doctors, and other professionals were among the first to escape the war. The exodus dismantled many of Iraq's cultural institutions and effectively destroyed the middle class. According to the Iraqi Medical Association, approximately half of Iraq's registered doctors fled the country in the years immediately following the 2003 invasion, destroying what was once among the region's best healthcare systems. As a result, the infant mortality rate increased 150% from 1990 to 2005, and according to the World Health Organization, estimated 70% of Iraqis lack access to clean water and 80% lack sanitation. These days, the Islamic State, reign of terror in Iraq, contributes to even further displacement. As of June 2014, UNHCR reported that 1.9 million people left Iraq. A year later, this number went up to 3.3 million, with more than 60% of Iraqis citing ISIS as the reason for them leaving. Add that to 3.8 million externally and 7.7 million internally displaced people in Syria. All that, of course, is taking its toll on Europe, with official UN data suggesting almost 900,000 refugees applied for asylum in European countries last year. It is still debated what caused the biggest refugee crisis since World War II. Many point the fingers directly at the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, also believing it paved the way to the creation of ISIS. Others, like former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, are still in denial that the occupation of Iraq caused such dire circumstances. But there is a solid fact: the refugee situation in the Middle East is only getting worse. And on top of that, last January, UNHCR said it had only received just a half of the $337 million it needed to help the displaced Iraqis in the Kurdish region of the country. That's only one group in many when it comes to those who fled the war. Alexey Yaroshevsky, RT, reporting from Washington, D.C.